Hey everybody, what's up? It's Booksy. Today is December 7th. It's about to be market close in a couple minutes here. I'm going to be doing an update video for AMC. I may not do one tomorrow. We'll see how we'll see how it goes. If it ends up working out, then I probably won't do one tomorrow. But again, we'll see. So I know that what you're seeing on the screen right now, if you're watching, probably looks like a hot mess. There's a lot going on here, and I do need to kind of explain it. I'm going to be talking a little bit about that quote-unquote master fractal, as we call it. It's really a great teaching tool, a guide, and it's been pretty accurate for the last 2 years, ever since I found it actually in December, almost this exact time like December 2021. So pretty interesting. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, talk about some accumulation and distribution ideas, and we'll talk about these creeks that I've got on the screen. So the big thing right now is that after we came over the top, we came up above, 750. I knew that it probably had gone a bit high for my liking. I think that, we're talking about pressing up, making higher highs while we've also been making higher lows. I know that obviously would seem good, and there's no major sign of weakness early on either, which is also good. But in a distribution, you may not always get that kind of obvious sign of weakness. You may sometimes just see it come over the top a couple times to sell off. Now, here's where things get a little bit interesting, because this is a head and shoulder. I think it's pretty obvious what that is. And when it first came down, I saw the shoulder forming, and I thought, well, if the shoulder breaks beneath the neckline, you might have a pretty low target. Now, to do a head and shoulder target, at least with Bukowski's methodology, you would take the height of the head down to the neckline. In this case, it's 75 cents. You multiply it by like 51%, which is a weird number, all right? But basically what you get, right, you think about half of 70, it's like 35. Half of 5 is 2.5, so maybe 37, and then you might add a penny. Basically what you get on this head and shoulder breakdown is that you'd come down to this lower level, and I got a target. It looks like it's done wrong now, but maybe I used the higher one and not the lower one last time I did it, which would change it slightly. Basically gives you a target of like this low 650s area, okay? And the guy that was on the stream the other day probably be like jumping up and down saying like, I told you so, 650, I told you so. Well, if it breaks down and it continues to break down, you would think that this complex head and shoulder would have to break down one more time. And if it did, you'd come down probably to that 650 area. Now, the next question you have to ask is that likely and is it possible? And the answer is, yeah, I think it's likely. I think it's possible. I don't think it's out of the question. And to that end, I think that it's even probable that that could happen. But here's where things start kind of getting a little bit interesting, because normally if I look at something like this, I would assume the head and shoulder plays out and you're going to get to that low. You can see on the 15-minute RSI, we've got some space. We've been kind of chopping upward while the price is coming downward, which is an interesting little divergence. We actually have on the bottoms here, currently we have a hidden divergence. The RSI, I know it's hard to tell, but the RSI is actually slightly down. And if you go to 30 minutes, you can see it a little bit better. The RSI is actually slightly down coming into these bottoms. I think right here it just looks like it's still like way up here. But if you go to like the regular trading hours on like 30 minutes, there's a hidden divergence there where the RSI is actually coming down while the price is still up higher, which is kind of interesting. Another thing is that I use this RSI strategy quite a bit. It doesn't always work super well depending on how you use it. I don't usually use it with extended hours on. I typically use it in like regular trading hours. But what I've noted is that in a range, it's actually very good. I'm more than willing to share these at some point in the future. I need to do it with the Discord group, and so you guys could set up your own. Basically what I did is I used the RSI strategy builder, and I just tweaked it until I got it to where I wanted it to high percentage yield. And from 6 minutes to 15 minutes, it's pretty darn accurate. And if you can get both a 6-minute and a 15-minute buy-in, usually you're in good shape. Well, we got both, but in this case, I want you kind of see what I mean when I start looking at this 15-minute RSI trigger. So what it does is it's triggering. You can see there's an RSI 30, RSI 10. It's triggering based on like how it goes, and you get the double signal. It's usually a pretty decent sign, and you can see that in this particular case, it's been very, very accurate. Yes, there's a couple times where if you had waited too long, you might have gotten a lower price out, right? Both of these, they're climbing. This one is actually descending. Both of these are descending. The one we have now and the one we had at the beginning. This one is actually climbing, but it doesn't really matter. The first signal is usually not the end-all be-all signal. It's the RSI 30 signal, and it has to do with how low it came and then the recovery back over 30. The next one is the one that typically plays out pretty well if you see a reversal also in price. So if you get that RSI plus 10 and you see a breakout of the price, usually you get a pretty strong reversal. And in this particular range, you can see it's like a sine wave. We've had fairly consistent ups and downs, fairly consistent, very, very consistent. You can see these are all trajectories. I've got them at like, well, they were at like 61. I might have done that in extended hours. So hang on. Yeah. So in extended hours on, there we go. These should all be the same. Yeah, they should all be, 52, 52, 52, 52. So you can see the wave structure here is like 52 degrees up, 52 degrees down, 52 degrees up, 52 degrees down. Notice that the price action today, which is Thursday, is that 52 degree up signal, and it goes to the bottom here. And this is where we're going to get to kind of like, we're kind of like jumping all around, I know, but basically what that means to me is like I got a 15-minute buy signal on RSI. I would definitely want to check on higher time frames and see if that's going to pan out. I haven't done that yet. So I would definitely want to go up to like 30 minutes or an hour and just see like, well, what does it look like? Do I have, that good signal? Well, right here you can see on a 1 hour, you're also getting that hidden divergence. And this is actually with extended hours on. So you see how the price is coming up. The price is higher. The RSI is lower, and we might be getting that bounce. And I'm actually getting on the 1 hour that buy signal, which is very similar to what happened over here. Now, again, you kind of have to like take these things into consideration. This is a plus 20, so this one doesn't come down all the way, but it's very similar to this previous bottom. The one thing we were kind of missing today was that break. After the breakout, there's that slide down. And same thing happened over here. It broke out and slides down. This one does not have that per se, so it's not quite the same. But I noted that it was pretty similar to what we see here in terms of like the rise along that trend, and then there's a breakdown, rise along the trend, and breakdown. So is it possible this isn't even a bottom and we still have one more leg? Yes, because technically, even though this could be like a 1, 2, 3 type correction, there could be a fifth wave. This didn't make any lower lows when it came down. Bulls would look at that and say, hey, that's pretty strong. It made a higher low here, and then it's come back up, made a higher high. It just needs to make one more higher low. It's outside of the downtrend. We already saw that a minute ago. So it broke out, got the signals. Let's just go, right? Well, possibly, yeah. And there's a wedge here as well. There's this wedging action, and the wedge breakout target is right around the 730s. That makes sense because that's, again, back over the top here. That would be significant for a couple reasons. One is, if you get back up to the 730s, you are back above, and I've got Tesla pulled up, but let me, actually, it's not on this chart. Hold on. I'm going over here where it says charge point, and then I'm going to pull up the 4 hour. Charge point looking pretty spicy, but we'll see. It has to hold this kind of SOS stage here. Yeah, so you can see how this could be a 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we need a 5 perhaps, that final drop. Not positive about that, but definitely a possibility. It could be an ABC correction. It's about to reverse. We're just seeing kind of like wave 1. We're going to see 2 and 3. But you can see why that would be significant, because coming up to 730 once again places you above that kind of S-curve trend. Now, could it be for distribution? Possibly. Possibly. Here's another thing that I wanted to note, though. Yes, on the higher time frames like the 4 hour, RSI looks like it's broken down. On the daily, Kind of looks like it's bottoming out, and or it may have like that S curve in it. It's hard to really tell right now, but it has kind of reacted. So if it does have some upside, I don't think it would be that far-fetched at all. When you get up to like daily and weekly and monthly, it's not really an issue. 4 hour kind of makes it look like, you know, it could be a breakdown. It still needs to come down quite a bit. So it's a mixed bag. But I want to make note of this really quick. On this head and shoulder, notice that these are the two shoulders right here, and these are basically the left and the right side of the head. Notice what's going on with the volume. Volume is significantly greater on the rise up. They both have a similar kind of like up and down pattern in terms of the shoulder, where the middle's higher, but selling this doesn't outweigh buying here. It's not heavier selling than buying. I think that it's a possible sign that this head and shoulder might not actually complete. It may not break that neckline. And there's one place that we see that pretty frequently, and that is in what we call our master fractal. And in the master fractal, it's kind of a complicated thing because I've made such a mess of this in the past that my chart now looks like a mess. There's a head and shoulder, though, on the right side, and it looks very similar. It's not the same. It looks very similar to what we're experiencing right here. If you look at this as kind of like a 1, 2, and then 3, which is sort of what it is, you've got this initial place where you're kind of creating a footing, right? And then this eventually returns back to that footing when you get back to the beginning. You can see that this is a bounce with a cat ear top. This is a bounce with the cat ear top. You've got the double up thrust, M-shaped bottom right here, and then you go up into the top. And then basically it just head and shoulders back down to the place where you've got like mid liquidity. Now we're already at mid liquidity right now. Middle liquidity for us is exactly basically where we're at. It's like 781. It really is like right where we are. So we're sitting in that area. Could we distribute from it down, break that neckline, head low? Absolutely. I don't think it's outside the possibility of what's going on here, but it is kind of curious because while I don't think this is like an everything kind of thing, I want to be clear, I do think that this kind of a patterning can be deceptive. You know, when this particular thing happened, the big thing, like when this master fractal happens, the big things that I always try to point out are, one, it's that sine wave, right? There's like the big M shape, right? And then each one of these has like the smaller M shape, and then the smaller M shape is built into each one as it goes smaller and smaller. We can't really do that very easily with the current range that we're in, but we can see the waves, 1, 2, 3. And we definitely know that this wave and this wave are basically the same because we've got the trajectories up and down, very, very similar. The next thing that is really important is that this doesn't break below the creek that's jumped, essentially. Now, this isn't a very easy one to identify, in my opinion. I actually think it's kind of difficult to identify in some ways because you kind of have to know what you're looking for over here. You can see it over here that it actually looks like it kind of dips below it a little bit at the very end. But the big thing that, again, takeaway is that it comes back to essentially what would be considered like a liquid center before the takeoff point. Notice where that is in relation to where we are right now. Notice that this came back to here and also back to here, right? And then look at where we are currently, and I'm going to kind of like screw up my chart a little bit, or screw up my thing a little bit right now. I jump back and forth some. And then just notice where we are presently. Now, I don't want to give you like, I don't like, you know, people talk about like hopium, and that can be sort of dangerous, right? Like this idea that like, well, if he says this and it doesn't happen, then I'm screwed. Well, a lot of that's just trading and making sure that you're not over leveraging. And understanding that this is not a definite thing. Like, this is a maybe thing. This happens, and it does happen, and it is a way to understand some of the price movement on AMC, but it is not an all-the-time kind of thing. But notice the 3 spots right here that we're kind of sitting in, okay? And then do that comparison to the 3 spots here, right? Where you have that, and you can see why I'm like skeptically kind of like optimistic here, because it's very similar to the patterning that we usually see when we see this kind of S curve come up and then come back down. And right now, I believe that it's doing that. I took an estimation based on this particular angle right here, which is like 21 degrees. You see it's a pretty strong estimation of like where the creek is at this point. Well, if you take the same one, and again, I know it might be kind of messed up depending on which way we look at it, and you apply it to where we are now. See, I already messed it up earlier. You can see that we're kind of skirting right on it. So we've basically created these waves up, and we haven't broken them yet. Now the next one up, the next level up, not surprising to me, if you take that 21 degrees and you apply it to this previous top, it's almost like a perfect touch, if not perfect, on these double cat ears on the top here. And again, note where it's going up to. Like the high here is like 720. And then if you break out and get to that target, right? We talked about that wedge, falling wedge target possibly being up here. You're talking about coming up above high liquidity here. You're talking about coming up into this little pocket, essentially, from roughly 720. Again, trajectory-wise, you got to look at where the trajectory is going up to here. And this whole area puts you above that main creek that we needed to be above. Now, again, could it be distributive? Yes. But if it is not, if this thing can continue on here, this could be a massive fake out for the bears. I think it's at this position right now where, frankly, I could see how bears have an upper hand, and I'm kind of like, yeah, I get it. You know, it looks bad. It came up high. It's come down low. But I actually don't think it's dropped the creek yet. I think it dropped that really important, massive creek. I think that was kind of the signal that bears wanted, and they started selling down, but I don't necessarily think that this is done. And to that end, we know that this was a Friday move and it was really explosive. Now, I'm not saying this is going to be a Friday move. I'm not saying it's going to be this huge explosive thing necessarily. It could be Monday. It could not happen at all. But I do think it's very important to kind of note where all of these things are happening. And I think that it's a very significant kind of factor in all of this. And I'm actually going to take a picture of this, share it with the Discord group because I haven't talked to them about it yet. But I want to talk about this. So I think, volume-wise, we could be looking at kind of a fake head and shoulder, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's not as heavy on the right side as it is on the left, and that's weird. Because the head and shoulder that's predominantly seller-based, that's about to reverse and go down, well, you should see more significant volume. That's all I think we should have to say about it. I also think there's a hidden divergence here. I think that it just requires that buyers show up. And if they do, I really do think this is going to be kind of like a very quick, explosive move to the upside. And I think you're going to camp here. And then I don't think we're necessarily going to get over like 750, may not even get over 7 tomorrow, just depending on how long this takes. But I do think it's very possible that this could actually break back to the upside, and it could be a very explosive move at that point, back up to highs. Now, I did a widening target. This is a weird one for Bukowski. It's basically called a right angle, and there's different ways of looking at this. You can this is the upside down version of this, where it's like I don't know what the advertisement's on there. Hang on a second. That was kind of lame. But yeah, this is like the upside down version of it. So this is basically like where you've got the flat on the top versus the bottom. There's another one just like it that has it in reverse. Anyways, I did the targets on it, and not surprisingly, they come up to like 8 to 820. So basically, it's this little pocket right here. Why is that not surprising? Because that places you right on top of that 805 or 801 that we had earlier. I have it as 802. People like to talk about 801 because it's nostalgic, but basically the targets were like right here for this breakout. So if it can manage to make this move, I think it's very likely that it breaks out and then it heads on up to the top. Just so happens, of course, that looks like a pretty nice like 50-50 spin here back up to the 8s. Again, if it comes down, how low could it go? Well, look, if it makes a new low here, it's actually not over yet because it's come up so far and it stayed so high that we haven't even tested this lower head and shoulder marker. So I went ahead and looked at this, and what I did is I drew out, and you can't see it because this silly dotted line. There you go, right there. So I drew out the parallels on the head and shoulder because I wanted it to make sure that it kind of looked like what you would see here. And so when I look at the head and shoulder, and I'm gonna straighten this one out, and I'm gonna make it like white or something so you can just kind of tell that it's different. Okay, when you look at the head and shoulder here, which is pretty obvious to me, when it did break down, it does come roughly to where that bottom is. So it does have that kind of, oh no, we're crashing moment, but it only comes down to about where that is. Now, I just pointed out that we're already kind of there at that place where I would expect it to go. But if this were to break down, even if it hit a new low, if it stayed above like 670 as a new low goes, it'd still be fine because it's still above that trend. On the other hand, if it were to complete the head and shoulder by breaking through that level around 670, you still have the creek below around 665. And then, of course, yeah, from that point, the head and shoulder target's much lower. It's in the 650s, mid 650s. So is that still possibly like a bottom? Possibly. But I think at that point, if it just slid down, unless it went and took all day Friday, which it could do, I'm not saying it can't happen. It could take all day Friday and come down later, so it could break down and go sideways and go down later. If that were to happen, you could end up with a 650 week, but it would probably look like it's beneath that creek. And so there's going to be a whole nother bunch of issues. You don't want it beneath that creek, basically. And other people have pointed out, like, hey, couldn't this be just like a big old S-curve? In which case, you know, this is just a bunch of hopium. You know, it's going to drop down to 630s. Yeah. You know, we do the best we can. I've provided some evidence, I think, of some pretty strong possibility here for bulls, but it has to continue, right? Like, you have to have continuation. You have to have that kind of support built where we are now or just slightly lower. You don't want to come beneath this creek. You don't want to be dropping through that neckline at the end of the day. And ultimately, yeah, I think that if you find support here, even if it continues a little bit lower than it is now, if you can find support here and break out, you've already left this creek behind. And I think that that's a really big positive. I think that when you look at the big picture here, you know, easy to be kind of like bearish when, you know, you're seeing this and you're like, the volume's not that good. It just looks like a flag. I don't disagree with that, but the reversal is very close. All that really needs to happen is that we come back up, recapture that 690 level. We find support, capture 690. And I think at that point it can just fly back up to the 730s. I don't think it would take very long to get there. I think it could be a pretty volatile move. Just like these other ones, they have these massive moves once they break out. I think we're looking at something very similar. And the buy-ins here have been really large. Now the breakdown is a little more minutia to it, but it's very similar as well. And I think that you're kind of right at the same point where it could break down, and if it does, it's not that far away. So the breakdown and the breakout are very, very close here, okay? It's a tight little area. And yeah, I do think at that point, you're going to kind of watch and see if it can find ground early. And if not, we might be going low. You know, that's definitely not out of the question that we come down really far and dive for liquidity. But based on this structure, historically, it does better at continuation when volume shrinks. And volume has actually grown as this structure has gone on. So I think that it's a possibility that this is going to reverse. All right, I'm not going to talk about too much else today. I think this is kind of like the big picture. It doesn't seem great, you know, when you see that breakdown here, where you see the head and shoulder. But when you start looking at volume, it's just not as convincing, you know, as I think it should be. I think we're kind of waiting to see if it does that last leg and or breaks out. It's already left the trend, but it, you know, things could change. And then we're going to really want to watch and see what happens from about 7:20 up to 7:30. In terms of the other couple stocks I've been talking about, ChargePoint double miss on earnings, kind of a bummer. I was hoping they'd like have a double beat, but that's the way that the cookie crumbles. That's the way it crumbles. This doesn't look particularly great to me because it looked a little bit like the second motion here, which went higher, happened on less volume. There wasn't really much divergence to speak of, but it definitely was a weaker push. So when we came back down, I was watching closely that 219 level. It did bounce there twice. We got a little bit of a double bottom on that. That's good because that could be the top. If this is going to SOS, it needs to kind of create that SOS now and confirm that that's support. There is a possibility of an SOS with a backup. And in this case, the creek is pretty low. You can see like the last two highs here press that creek up. And so there is the lower creek, which is pretty far down. And that would be, you'd have to be some kind of like a head and shoulder type reversal here or something to get you down there. But really, like at this point, I kind of just don't want to lose the trend. There's a nice little trend that's formed. And I think if it can hold this trend, it's going to be a lot stronger. So I would prefer it not come below like that 212. I think that's really important if it does have a drop. This clearly looks like a fake out breakout because it did jump it. It came back and checked it in a really heavy volume sell-off. And then now after hours, it's like back below. We're going to have to wait and see what happens because if it can come back above and hold above it, that could be it. It jumped over the little local creek and it could continue. So it needs to then make higher highs and then, of course, go. I'm looking at this as a leap play. So even if it comes back down and it comes back to that 212 area, I'm not overly concerned. It's got infinite number of gaps to the upside. I don't think this stock is going to go bankrupt ultimately. So when I look at this, I'm not overly worried about that kind of stuff. I think if it can find support, it'll be in good shape, but it has to sort of get to that point. I know on the 15-minute, it just barely got over. So this is kind of the moment of truth, right? It's like it gets over the 30-minute, and if it's distributive, it usually breaks back down through it pretty quickly. And you can see in this downtrend, it really hasn't been over the 30 EMA very much. And if it does, it's usually in a distribution kind of moment, unfortunately. So we're kind of at that right now. Like you can see that's the 180 and we just jumped over it. We're kind of sitting right on top of it. This is the time when you definitely would want to see it find some support. And then the next leg up is that 1 hour and that's up here around 245. You can see that was a liquidity shelf from back in the previous range. So again, it kind of makes sense. We would come back there and check that level and see if we want to head back up. We're almost there. So I think it's a stone throw away from a possible another rejection point. There's an intersecting creek right there. If you look back at September 5th and you go through and you check November 15th, you see that it's also kind of right at that marker. So I think we're going to run into some serious resistance around 238 up to 242. If for some reason it can get above 250, and a nice push, I think if you come back down, find support on that 240, that's when I think you're going to get that really nice momentum and should come in to the upside. Obviously, I'm being bullish about it. I've got my graph set up where I'm thinking it might go up. That could change. It could come back down. I think the buy-in, though, and just the setup on the whole has been pretty strong. Like it's trying to work its way out. I think that the repeating iteration to breaking sideways looked really good. I don't think you should ever phone in, when we talk about trading, I don't think you ever should phone it in. So I'm still watching it and I'm still thinking that, lots could happen up here above 240 if it gets there. In terms of like the options chain, this one's pretty weak still. The bid and the ask finally came back together today. It was like ridiculously far apart. And then we had some pretty decent volume come in on the last couple of days. You have like 10, 11% days. I'm trading some shares too, and those are looking pretty happy right now. But the leaps that I got, they're just not overly active yet. So the bid and the ask finally came back to, within a few cents. So that's good. You're seeing a lot more volume and open interest on those, which is good. My plan was not to trade a pop. If it happens to be something where I see an obvious distribution, I'm probably going to have to try to get out. But at this point, I'm pretty optimistic. There's a huge amount of divergence on pretty much all time frames. You can see it right here. It's very strong. Doesn't mean it's going to run forever, but it's definitely got leg room. You know, the 4 hour is only sitting here around like 50 still, and it's got that divergence really clearly. The 1 hour also has some pretty decent divergence in the same spot right here. You can see it's already turned up, and the stock price is still going down. You know, it's broken out too on the RSI, and it's clearly like coming back above now. It came back, tested resistance. So it's in a really good spot for a possible reversal. You just need to see like those buyers step in. You can see the buying is starting to come in pretty heavy here, and I think that's a good sign. Weekly, it's right at the cross. So I think if, again, you see that divergence on the weekly, it's right there on that bottom. It's very oversold on the weekly. It hasn't been oversold ever, really. And the last time we saw it overbought was way back here, 3 years ago. So been very careful to kind of keep this weekly from getting overdone. And I think that this particular move, it may not be the bottom. You might see a bounce, and then you could see a bottom, really hard bottom later, just like this one has like a double top. There could be a double bottom here, but it definitely feels ripe for a big reaction. It feels like it's in that spot. And I'm counting on it coming back up to like $9 or $10 within the next year or so. And I've got leaps for that. So I'm still feeling really good about it. I know that this trade might not be for everybody. Do your own DD about it. Obviously, I can't do that trade for you. I was talking to somebody about Tesla earlier. I don't want to do Tesla right now, but I did put it in the chat. So if you guys wanted to check it out. The SPY, I don't have a lot of strong feelings about it, except I'm a little bit annoyed because it was really just a choppy sideways week this week. Whole lot of fake outs, big double flush right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times it's been widening here. Really, it seems like they're trying to shake somebody out. They're trying to shake everybody out, right? It's a giant widening, but it's gone from like a big widening to like a smaller widening, and it hasn't decided direction just yet. I mean, you got to be honest about it. It's come over the top a couple times here. It's sold off 1, 2, 3 times, it looks like. This could be the one where it pushes up finally and goes up to the top, but I felt like it was bearish on higher time frames, and I was looking at an entry way over here to see if it come down. It never did. I'm glad I got out because it just sort of rocked. I think it just rocked up and down like crazy the rest of the week, and I know this would have gotten thrashed. I don't really have a strong sense of direction on this one. It's pretty much a symmetrical cone. A lot of people are looking for all-time highs. I personally think it's a bit overcooked on those higher time frames. I think it's ready to come back down and head towards some bigger retracements, like maybe even a big 50% retracement here. But SPY is an ETF. It's made up of other stocks. The market's been really strong, so it's hard to say. I think it's not one-sided. And I've done enough analysis on that for now. I don't really want to do that in the video, but just to hint at it, I just don't have any strong direction right now, so I'm not personally like investing in it. And you're more than welcome to do whatever you want to do. But I have feelings that this is needing to take a break. A lot of RSIs crossed down on higher time frames. We haven't gotten that kind of 50% retrace that we usually get. And I think it could use it. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. That's all I got for you today, though. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. And I will talk to you tomorrow. If something goes crazy or it's not at all like what I thought it might be, maybe I'll catch you all and do it again. But otherwise, I hope you guys have a great weekend. We'll talk to you later.